Hello, everyone. Welcome back to a new episode of Aux Fiends. I'm your co-host Mateo. I'm joined with my other co-host Rishabh. Rishabh, say hi.
Hello, everyone. How you doing?
Basically, if you're new to Aux Fiends, every week we alternate and choose an album, and we go track by track of that album, and we just review it. Sometimes we're blind, sometimes we like the album, sometimes we don't. But anyways, enough blabber. Rishab, what is this week's album?
Well, before we get right into that, Mateo, I want to recommend everyone, as we do at the top of the episode here, to go ahead and listen to the album first. As you know, we go track by track, so it's always good to try and come in, if you can, with the entire album, listen through. I know for sure it helps to kind of give some of these reviews a little bit more context. Today's album, too, should be an interesting listen, Mateo, because we have what I think is our lengthiest album to date. Am I wrong, or am I right?
I definitely think you're right. I don't know if it has as many tracks as Echo Jams had.
Yeah.
But I definitely think it's had definitely the lengthiest overall runtime.
I think Discovery clocks in at 43 minutes. So we're really pushing this one at 50 minutes. So it's quite a bit ahead.
Okay.
But you know what, Mateo? I'm excited to talk about this one with you, I should say. I know that we may disagree on this one, but I still think there's a lot of...
I don't know. Maybe not.
Oh, okay. That's a sign.
We'll see. We'll see.
You know, either way, what I was saying is I think we've got an interesting album on our hands. I think this album is also particularly deceptive, not getting too far as usual, but if you start from track one, really from this album, you kind of feel like you have a sense of where the rest of the album's going to go, but it kind of pulls the rug from under you and does some things that I think are a little bit interesting. But we'll get into that later. First, I want to provide a little bit of background, since I am 100% sure nobody is, at least I would say 99% of listeners are not familiar with this artist, certainly not familiar with the album. So let's talk about it a little bit. The pronunciations, Mateo. Here's how we're going to do this, okay? I'm going to say it already. I'm going to say it already. I will not be trying the actual pronunciations. I cannot do that.
Yeah. Just for any clarification, just to get out of the way, Rishab and I both are terrible at speaking already. Don't ask how we have a podcast, but also I just went by like the genius lyrics, like Google Translate.
Yes.
Of everything. So if something's like a wrong title or something's wrong, sorry.
Yeah, apologies in advance. That's what I can say. And I will try and say the album name here. It's Целуй меня, which means kiss me. And it's by Mariya Chaykovskaya. And I feel like I got that last name right this time. I think last time when I was introducing the album on our Plantasia episode, I struggled over it a couple different times. So I'm glad that kind of is out of the way.
Yeah, it came up right off the tongue for you. They're
thank
better
you,
than
thank
me.
You.
They're better than me.
I appreciate that. So let's talk about this singer. Firstly, we have a solo artist here today. I think we've had a few solo artists for sure, but it's always interesting to have a solo artist. And obviously not from the United States. We're talking about somewhere from, outside of the US. I know most of our listeners are probably from the United States. And let me run through some of the background of the singer, Mateo. So she's from Ukraine. She's a Ukrainian singer, pianist, and songwriter. And so here was the thing that I was confused on. I don't know if you were confused on this, but I wasn't sure if she was singing in Ukrainian or Russian. So I found out that she...
don't know.
Yeah, she writes and sings in Ukrainian and Russian. And if you do... Look, and here's my very basic research. Please correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. But I believe these are languages that are quite similar to each other. So I think there's like a blend of Ukrainian and Russian that is spoken in Ukraine. And if you're someone from that area, if you're from Ukraine, Russia, or you just know a little bit more about this, please let me know in the comments, because I'm genuinely interested in knowing, how close those languages are. But I believe this album is primarily in Ukrainian, probably, maybe with a little bit of Russian. Don't quote me on that, just a guess. But I think overall she sings in both.
Okay. That's definitely really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, so we're looking at an Ukrainian artist today. A little bit of background. So her influences, I think, Mateo, this should not surprise you too much. Thanks to her mother, I'm reading off this website, classics and jazz were constantly heard in her house, which had a real impact on the sound of her music. And it shouldn't surprise anyone who's listening to the entire album that piano is like the instrument for her. And she's received what is basically a very kind of classical training that I think it's different from maybe some of the other artists we talked about on the podcast so far. She got a job as a jazz and classical pianist in the large jazz group Regent Art Orchestra and went on tour in Europe. I think, according to this website, which, by the way, this is a Google translated biography, but I believe she was the only woman in the team of 10 people at the time. Again, she did a lot of solo jazz concerts. She also performed classical jazz compositions and went on to, record a lot of different singles and albums. She met a singer-songwriter who was a frontman of something known as Human Factor Ensemble. And they kind of developed a close cooperation after that and began creating albums together and started working together a lot. In 2015, she released this album called Kiss Me, and she performed at the Moscow Red Club and so on. And I don't know if you figured this out, Mateo, maybe through a little bit of basic Google search, but the first track on this album has a little bit of a viral sensation going on.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I don't want to jump into it too much yet, but I definitely knew it. I knew the song. I didn't know it, but I knew the sound. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's interesting. I think, Mateo, what do you think about the background I gave here a little bit? I think a little bit different from the type of artists we've been talking about so far.
For sure. I mean, honestly, for your picks, I kind of just go in way blind. I don't even Google search other than the lyrics. So to hear that she had kind of classical training, I absolutely hear the super jazz influence from what you said it was her mom, right? In the house. I definitely hear that. I don't know. I think it's interesting to hear someone like Mariya who kind of has a little more training and put togetherness. I feel like it's a little more. It's a little more formal.
Yes,
I get how you can say it's a little more formal. Not to say the other ones, not to say Daft Punk or Wayne definitely ain't formal,
right?
But it is just more formalness to this. There's more classic. It's more astute, I could say.
Yes, yeah, that's a good word to put to it. I was going to say structural. I think you're getting at the same thing here. I'll say there's a lot of things in this album that are. You could say they play by the rule book, but what I like about the album is that there's also a lot of bending of the rules. So I highly suggest Googling this artist. I know we basically gave a very basic understanding here, but there's a lot of interesting aspects of her life and definitely a lot about her influences, which we'll get into anyway. So without further ado, Mateo, I'm excited to hear your thoughts.
Yeah.
I'm hearing a slight positive bent, but I won't go too far. So let's go ahead and talk about.
Don't go too far. No.
Let's talk about. You have to
wait to the end. You have to wait to the end.
I'm excited to hear it. Let's talk about TikTok viral track 1, Mateo. In the Room of Colored Capes, that's the English translation. Mateo, what do you think about our first track on the album here?
Okay. I'll say it straight up. I am in. That's
nice.
Immediate first thought when I heard that chorus. When I first pressed start, I had no idea it was this viral TikTok song that I had heard before.
Yeah.
But then when that chorus hit, I think it sounds great. I thought that song was beautiful. I absolutely loved that melody. Dude, I'm gonna be honest, that piano made me want to cry. I like you up. I was crying.
I'm a little surprised to hear it. Mateo. I felt like you wouldn't like this track, but I'm excited to hear that because I share your thoughts exactly.
Yeah.
Would you say? I was going to ask you. Would you say? This sets up the tone for the rest of the album in some way, or do you feel it's a little bit deceptive? Because I think it's a little bit of both.
Whoa. Okay. I don't think it's deceptive at all. I think this really does set up the album. I think. Yeah. I'm not going to get into it right now, but there are other tracks. Well, I will just think back to the first track in the Room of Colored Capes where I'm just this is the Mariya sound. It's going back. My memory is just going back to this sound she kind of captures in this song. So I don't think it's deceptive. I don't think it's
Yeah.
deceptive.
Only reason I say deceptive is because I think it's a very simple song. It's, again, putting Maria's sound in the first track. I would say here you're getting her one style, which is very piano and voice, right? It's just those two elements put together. It's just like, let's talk about her voice. I mean, how often, at least in American music, I can't speak for the entire world. How often do you really get to hear that, you know, the strength of a classically trained voice? Not very often, I would say. So that was something I absolutely love throughout the album, is that the way she's hitting the notes is just, it seems so easy for her. It's really astonishing to me. And the piano that accompanies it is very dramatic, very cinematic, very strong piano notes going on here. And that's something that's reoccurring through all the album. And that's, in that way, I would agree with Mateo and say that that's very much, it tells you what to expect down the line. And like you said, the melody, the chorus, it's beautifully composed, really. I think so.
Yeah.
The only part where I would say it's a little bit deceptive is where I was mentioning that, you know, it's a more of a simple track, which I think some of the other tracks are also equally somewhat, you know, have that classical air to them, but there's some things that get a little bit more experimental. So slightly deceptive in that way, but I would say this is a very good intro track to what you can expect down the album, and easily one of my favorite tracks for sure. For sure.
I see what you mean by kind of deceptive, and I mean you're kind of right. Yeah. I will say, but I think it had good placement being the first track. I think
I agree.
Simple, it was good. It was bold and kind of beautiful. Yeah. I think to open up the album, if it was maybe halfway into the album and I had heard some of the other songs, and I'm like, wait, this isn't as kind of creative. It's creative, but it's just not as fluid.
I agree with that.
You know. So I just. I guess I sort of agree.
Yes,
which is
I
maybe a first for Aux Fiends.
It really is. I don't know if we've introduced the Bible concept here yet on the show, but every time Mateo and I agree, it goes in Bible.
Yes, it's Bible, because that never happens. So if it does happen, it's
Bible or whichever religious text you ascribe to. But it's true, basically. Yeah, it's whatever is truth for you. Yeah. So I think we're on the same page here. Let's quickly mention that TikTok track we've been alluding to. So I think there was like a little bit of a remix done, which, by the way, we'll get into a remix of this track when we talk about the end of the album.
Yeah.
But there was like a separate remix done, which had like chopped vocals of the chorus. I've listened to it. It sounds like a TikTok song. It's a creative take on the song, but I prefer the original.
Okay. I honestly, I don't remember that specific remix too much. I mean, I definitely, if you're talking about, it's just had like the chorus. I think the chorus is beautiful.
Yeah.
I think it's good enough how it is for the first song, but yeah, we'll kind of cover the last track when we get to there.
Yes.
The remix of it.
So Mateo, that should take us into track 2, Be My Boy.
Yeah. Why don't you take it away?
I'll go ahead and start with this one. What I like about this one, and I'm sure Mateo, you'll agree on this one, is this is Mariya really going into a blend of sorts, which is something we'll see throughout the album, where she'll start off the song a certain way, and then the composition really changes, the structure changes, new instruments are brought in. And I think that's what makes this album something that puts me on the edge of my seat when I'm listening, because you really don't know how the sound might transform even within a track, let alone the entire album. So the track really starts off with some of those like ethereal, kind of melancholic vocals. It has this wistful quality to it. There's a little bit background instrumentation, but it's still mostly voice and piano, kind of similar to the first track, but a little less intense. And then we get sort of this song opening up into what I can only describe as, well, it starts off a little bit soft rock, but a couple piano bridges later, and a couple of playing around with the notes, we're in a full rock and roll track here. Maybe not something, at the level of like a Led Zeppelin heavy metal, but it is definitely rock, and it's quite heavy. There's a lot of drumming. There's screeching guitars, and I just love that transition. So Mateo, I want to hand over to you. What do you think about that blending? What do you think? Did the song change your expectations as you went along?
Okay, so let me just get into it because I think I definitely have different thoughts about "Be My Boy" than you.
Yeah.
Me, one of the positives to me, I thought Mariya had a great rasp to her vocal range in this song.
Yes.
But if I'm being honest, this was actually my least favorite track on this album.
Wow. Okay. Okay. I can see it.
Let me make this clear. This was not bad.
Yeah.
It's just not my type. I thought it was a little too slow for me. I thought it did have a cute melody and kind of crescendo. And maybe that's what you're talking about with like the guitar, when it kind of just all jumbled up together. And if I'm being honest too, I don't know if it's good or bad. I guess maybe a little leaning towards a little more bad. But I kind of zoned out during this song. I just felt this was very easy to zone out more. And I didn't really like the reverb, if I'm being honest. Maybe when it kind of got a little more guttural. And overall, just to kind of wrap it up, I thought "Be My Boy" is just like a little too long. I think it could have been cut a little shorter.
Yeah, a lot of the songs are quite long, which I think adds to the overall length of the album. And coming back to what you said, I'm not like very disappointed that this is your least favorite. I'm a little relieved because I think there's some great stuff coming down. And if any of that was your least favorite, I would have been maybe a little bit more disappointed.
Yeah.
But structurally, I think Mariya does this quite often. Is she'll start off the song softly, maybe a little bit slow, and then it'll kind of build up and crescendo into this whole other beast, which I think this song does, but maybe not quite as well as some other tracks down the line. But we'll see what Mateo thinks about that in a minute.
Yeah. I do want to say though, this album, maybe I'm giving you too much credit. It was easy to pick this song just because I felt this was the most different. Actually, it's just one of the most out of place to me out of the album. But otherwise, if this wasn't on there, honestly, I don't know where I would have picked my least favorite. So
that could be good or bad, I guess. Could
be good or bad. For the song, it was bad. But
yeah.
You know.
But like I said, I'm glad this one was your least favorite because I think there's that proves that I think some of the other ones you have something that you like more than this one, and you're already saying this one's not bad. So that gives me some hope.
Yeah.
But I kind of agree, or at least I see where you're coming from. It's not maybe the most impressive one on here for sure.
Yeah.
Which I think takes us into track 3, By Thread. Mateo, what'd you think about this one?
This one I had the same feel. This is the back when I'm starting to feel the same, just like as when I heard In the Room of Colored Capes.
Yeah.
Just the same feel. I loved the lyrics. That's just kind of how I felt about. Is it by thread or a thread?
I see it says by thread.
Okay, that whatever again. Here's a little mix up. The lyrics I looked at said it was a thread, but I felt like this is kind of just reimbursing like Mariya's sound again.
Yes,
like there was a little offbeat with "Be My Boy," but this is coming back home. This is coming back.
I have slightly sparser notes for this one, but I think overall I like it. I think this one's a little bit darker. The piano notes are not quite as cheery. It's a little bit more, you can say dark, but the piano is still very virtuosic. I think it still has that kind of romantic, cinematic, sophisticated quality to it. I feel like I'm listening to someone who has that like robust understanding of the classical music, of classical piano, and is doing something a little bit more cinematic with it. And again, Mariya reuses a lot of musical elements throughout the album. And I think this is one of the first times I heard like the reverb or echo or overlay. But yes, this is another one where I think it's a lot of piano, voice, a little bit of that overlaying texture. I don't have a lot about this one, which makes me feel like maybe it didn't stand out to me while listening, but I also don't have anything negative. So I feel like this is one that structurally feels something very simple and very Mariya oh my gosh, her last name.
Mariya
Chaykovskaya.
I don't know.
So I'll agree with you there, Mateo, for the most part. Yeah,
I definitely do agree with what you said. Like, I don't have a ton that I'd written about this song, but I did for every track. I either put like a little check mark, or I put nothing, or I put like an X check mark if I think it's a top contender. And to me, this was a top contender for me.
That's good. That's good.
But I definitely think it was one of the better songs on the album, for sure.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah. Okay.
I think track number 4.
Track number 4.
Don't Go Away. Rishab, what'd you think?
Don't Go Away. So again, I thought this would start similarly to By Thread. It had that sad sounding dark theme in the beginning, but as usual, something that she does quite often, it builds into something different. It builds a little bit into a rock song again. So there is a lot of rock influences here, and you get a really good mixture of like that kind of screeching guitar sound. Screeching, I mean, in a really good way. It's a little bit of a heavy guitar sound, plus that very virtuosic classical piano. So I really like that blend. And I think Maria's voice is interesting because it's versatile, but it never loses its texture, which has this kind of silkiness to it. And I feel like that pairs surprisingly really well over rock instruments. It doesn't feel like her voice is being drowned out, which I think is proven in the song and a couple other tracks as well, is that somehow even like a jazzy classical sounding voice, which, might be the type of voice that you could hear in a different track somewhat in the background, that it's the type of voice that you might hear in a song that's played at a dinner party. But I think Mariya does a good job of, widening the array of the music that she can lend her voice to, and I think this track proves that.
It was almost like a mix of like jazz rock, like basically what you're kind of pointing at. Like, I actually definitely agree with that. I think she has really smooth, great vocals, and I think it's really interesting because I don't always see it in music where I would expect this, like you said, to be over some jazz, maybe a little more something classical in a nice little, dinner place. Instead, I'm getting a little more rock. And for Don't Go Away, I actually liked that mix up. I thought it was really creative use of the guitar. I thought here's where I thought the blend of the piano, the guitar, the vocals, everything, I really liked.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think you had mentioned it felt a little I don't know what you put it at, but I thought it was kind of a little like dirty in a graceful way, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It's a unique, ambitious blend of the two genres.
Yeah, ambitious. That's definitely the word. Yeah.
It's certainly something I don't see a lot happening here, stateside in the music, where especially, maybe it's because Mateo, we open up a broader music discussion here, is that I don't know how many artists would be willing to take that sort of risk. Especially in the mainstream, people who are well known, just because we are sort of a genre siloed music industry here in the country, in the US. I wonder if music from other places around the world is maybe not so constrained by that. Obviously, there are artists even here that blend, but it's rare now. I think, especially this blend, very rare. Never heard it.
Yeah,
same.
For sure.
Okay, perfect. Mateo, let's go on track 5. Eve. Do you want to start us off?
You know what? I will.
Yeah.
1 minute into the Eve, it brought me back to the Mariya classic sound. I'm just gonna say it now. This was my favorite track. I thought there was piano. I thought there was great vocal range for Mariya. To me, this is like an underdog song. Like, I feel like most people, if they were to listen to this album, they would maybe kind of overlook it. But just something about the way it all just went together, it just worked for me. I just really liked it. Looking at the lyrics as well, I just thought it was just my type of song.
Yeah, good. I also like this track. I think I like how we're just, having Mariya classics already. It's kind of like this classic sound that you can define. She does have a sound that's very definable, even though she has like a versatility. There is like a core sound tying everything together. And I agree that Eve is probably one of those tracks that you can really assert as a core Mariya sound.
Definitely.
The 3 words I'm using a lot here are romantic, sophisticated, larger than life. I mean, these songs, even though they're sometimes quiet, they don't feel small scale. I feel like an epicness to them. I think Eve is one of that, but it's still simple. Like, it's instrumentally, it's sparse. It's piano, it's voice, but it blends together really well. So I'll agree with you there for sure.
Yeah.
I think that's good for Eve. I'm interested. I think it's interesting that's your favorite track. I think I'll save my favorite track for a little bit later.
Okay.
But let's go on to track 6, Peter. It's called Peter. Yeah, let's I can take this
Yeah,
one.
go ahead.
We're seeing again guitar rock sound come in. And Mateo, here I had a quick note that I wanted to discuss with you actually. We're seeing again, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of repeating musical elements throughout the album,
Yeah.
especially a use of guitar and drums and rock. And I don't know what the instrumental situation was or how it was set up, but what do you think about that? I mean, in general, throughout the album, do you feel like it enhances a lot of the tracks, or do you think it's sort of like a fallback sound that's being
Um,
used too often? What do you think?
Actually, I think this is the perfect song to ask me for it because I think it works. To me,
Mhm.
I thought Peter really did it creatively, but kind of stuck with the theme of the album. Just like I just thought I think it works. I don't think it's a crutch. I don't think the way Maria uses it. I think it's more of a dance. I feel that it's like a dance with the vocals, the
Yeah.
instrumentation overall, instead of stealing the spotlight. That's
Yeah, I
definitely
would
what I think.
agree.
Yeah.
When I started listening to the sixth track, the reason I put that note down, I was like, it's quite repetitive throughout a lot of the songs, but really I agree with you. I think it enhances a lot of the tracks. I think it adds that creativity we were mentioning earlier, that ambition to pair jazzy vocals with a more rock sound. I think this is like honestly the most rock influenced song out of many of these tracks. I think it's probably the one that goes in rock terms the heaviest and the hardest. There's a lot of piano, a lot of drums, a lot of guitar. It builds up that sound. It also uses a little bit of synth here and there, or some like
Yeah, I was
synths
gonna
or
point that out.
sound.
It's like
Yeah.
I noticed the synth. Like that's where I was like, "Whoa, okay." Because I think this is the only track that has synth. I could be wrong. This is what the most notable like one for me. And
I
that's where
agree.
I kind of thought, "Oh, okay. Maria ain't playing around. She's
No,
building
she never does.
on her own sound." That's where I felt she was actually building on her own because it started out with just
Yeah.
piano, and then there was another song with that had the guitar, and now it's the
Yeah.
drums, the synth. Just like I think it's a good baseline.
Yes, I think
First, yeah,
building is the right word. I think this one really builds off of the elements that we've heard in the previous tracks. I think the piano gets more intense, the drumming gets, like I said, harder, heavier. The guitar really comes in, and it feels like we're really listening to a full rock song here, like a full-on rock
yeah.
song,
Oh, and
which
can I
is
just say,
yeah,
such a smooth guitar, so smooth. I don't know if you said she was just a pianist, right? So I'm assuming she's the one playing the piano. I don't know
yes.
who was playing the guitar. I don't know if it was her or whatever.
Don't
I liked
know,
it.
but yeah, yeah,
I
it's
thought it was
great.
good.
Yeah, the arrangements of the song are just great. The way like the drums and pianos and guitar when they kick in, it
Yeah,
really swells up the song with a different sort of power. And that's what I was saying is like, you listen to track 6, Peter, you listen to the song, it's such a full rock song. You'd be surprised if you listen to track 1, which is like just the classical piano medley,
yeah,
and then go straight to track 6, which like really cranks up the volume on the rock song. It's very different, but like we've mentioned here, there's a core sound tying it together. So that's just the best part of this album, like the fact that it's versatile, but you can still have that
yeah,
one thread tying it together.
yeah. I think you said it perfectly. I definitely agree. Yeah, that's
All right,
Bible.
Mateo, that is Bible. Let's go into track 7, Your Smell. I'd love to have you start us off.
I already know you're gonna cringe at what I'm about to say, but for your
Yeah.
smell, it felt like it was like music for like a trailer for a JRPG in 2007. Like, does that make any sense? Just feels like something that would be used in a trailer, and like I'm watching like maybe it's like a Final Fantasy esque kind of weird game. That's just the
Yeah.
vibe I got. I didn't
Yeah.
love your smell overall, but it wasn't bad. Honestly, I thought it was sort of forgettable. Other than the aspect, I thought it was. It just reminded me of like kind of like anime-esque game trailer
Yes.
kind of vibe.
For
Good
sure.
guitar, but overall, what do you think of your smell?
I agree with you, but I do like this track. I agree, but I think all the stuff you said, I agree with it, but perhaps more in a positive way. It is probably one of the more cinematic, interestingly paced rock ballads. It is very cinematic, and not in the way perhaps that the old songs were, where you had like this more emotional swell to it. This one's very like, it sort of builds up like a tension and a fast pace and the energy. There are guitars and synths that add tension. The ending of the song is, it lets the instruments flow. But I agree that this one is maybe one of the more cinematic ones, is how I'd put it. For sure. I like it though. I think it's still a unique sound coming off of the last track, and I always feel like there's some sort of experimentation being done where you don't really know what the next track will bring, which I think will lead us into our next track really well in terms of not knowing what to expect for On Friday. This thing came out of nowhere for me. Mateo, what did you think?
Yeah, no, I definitely get what you're saying. That's the first thing I wrote was nice acoustic instead of the kind of classic, just regular electric guitar. I thought the use of acoustic, it's like, again, I think we really pinpointed it on the head. The way Mariya builds upon her own sound is honestly just kind of amazing, I think.
Yes.
She still keeps that sound, but she's still able to do different things, be creative, and still grab me in. That's what I felt. I felt grabbed in. I was like, okay, this is familiar, but also different and new. Overall, On Friday was sassy and kind of rhythmic to me.
Yes, those are good words. Those are good words to use. I think, I agree. What I like about this one is it has like a swing, bossa nova, jazzy sound, which makes sense because then you really see that jazz influence come into picture in full form. I think, how we said Peter was sort of like the full-bodied like rock song. I think track 8 On Friday, we really get the full-on like jazz song. It's very jazzy. She kind of changes her vocal style a little bit here too. It's not as full. It's a little bit more light and breathy. There's more staccato singing. The acoustic comes in a little bit more lightly. It's not, that screeching electric guitar. You get like a full acoustic light guitar coming in. I really like this track. Definitely a contender for my top, if not my top, but up there for sure. It is hard to pick, I gotta say.
Same here, honestly. Definitely a top contender for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that brings us to track 9, which I think is also a very interesting track. Mateo, I want to hear what you thought about this one. I think this one's interesting.
Yeah. So track 9 is Beauty. As Aux Fiend tradition, you always got to point out the interlude. Rishabh, is this the interlude?
Weirdly, I don't. First of all, I want to say I don't think there was a very clear interlude in this album.
Yeah,
I think you'll agree with that.
A clear interlude.
Yeah,
but I feel like if there was one, this is it. I don't know. I thought this track is just kind of titled perfectly because the first thing in my mind was, oh, this is a beautiful song. Yeah. Like, to me, this sounds. This took the cinematic parts of like Your Smell, but to me, it kind of grew and built on it and made it better. I thought this Beauty could be. Sounds like it should honestly be in like a Studio Ghibli film. To me, it was graceful and soft, and I just really vibed with it overall. Rishabh, what did you think?
I'll go to your interlude point. I think On Friday is a more interesting interlude. I think it's a little reductive to say Beauty is an interlude. I feel like interludes are sometimes it's sort of a cynical view of it. An interlude would be it's sort of like a smaller song, whereas I think Beauty is one of the best songs on this album. Like you said, I agree with everything. It's dreamy, it's melancholic, it transports you to somewhere else. The violins, the way they're used, it's comforting, it's ponderous, and it brings in an element that I think Mariya uses a lot in the upcoming tracks too. Actually to a detriment in the upcoming tracks, but definitely a positive for this track is where you get that background noise. I hear ocean, I hear seagulls, I heard rain, and it was a beautiful mix. Beautifully done. Added so much to the vocals, added so much to the arrangement, having those, background ambient sound in there. That was a brilliant touch. I think that really seals the deal on this song and makes it something really new. Makes it feel like an experience. What do you think about that background part?
I liked it. I feel like Shorty going in with all the instruments, and I definitely noticed the waves and all the other noises. I think it kind of just brings it in more together. That actually goes. What I want to say is to counterpoint your interlude aspect, but also agree with the aspect that you said this kind of transports you. I think just because I called it an interlude doesn't mean it's bad or small. I think we just have different definitions of interlude. To me, a song that kind of transports you somewhere else.
Yeah.
That's what an interlude is. It's like a bridge between the album. Usually always in the middle, kind of just bridges you between. And I think with all the instrumental being so beautiful sounding and just like graceful and all the kind of background ocean waves and stuff, to me that's what kind of cemented it in as being my personal interlude of the album. That's
and
what
you know what? I can see where you're coming from. I think, yeah, we might have slightly differing definitions of an interlude, but honestly, I like your perspective too. That's a good way of putting it. And reflecting back on the tracks here, there was probably one other track down the line that I think is very close to being my favorite, but somehow I just feel very drawn to this one. So I'll probably seal this one as my favorite, actually. I just think it's maybe one of the most unique ones, and it really uses her vocals in an interesting way. Even though it's very hard for me to put this one down as my favorite, I think it's up there. It's one that I'll definitely come back to. It's very reflective. I really enjoy this one. So, Mateo, are you ready to go to the next one?
Yeah. 10,
Let's
track
talk
10,
about this one.
Archie?
Yes, Archie.
You take it away, Rishab.
This is my least favorite one.
Whoa!
Yeah,
What?
and it's a little bit surprising coming from me since I usually like a little pop peppy sound. But for me, Mariya,
Whoa.
hats off. I think it's not the worst thing to have this be as a pop song, but it sounds too much like a cheesy 80s, 90s song, like a Disc 2 song. And I didn't quite get why the ocean sounds from Beauty were carried over into this one. Felt like very forced. And what was, brilliant touch in the previous track feels like a weird misplace in this very pop, hip hop type track. What did you think, Mateo?
I don't know what you're talking about. I liked it.
Oh, okay.
To me, Archie sounded multicultural, if that makes any sense. I thought there was like use of Ukrainian, Asian, Hispanic like instruments. I liked it. I vibed with it. Was it my favorite song on the album? No. But I definitely don't think it's the worst one here.
I'm gonna be honest with you. I have no idea where you're coming from.
We're talking about track 10, right? Archie?
Yeah, Archie.
Yeah.
Like the peppier one? Yeah.
Yeah. What do you mean? That sounded super multicultural. I thought it was creative. I thought it was super creative with all the different instruments. That's where all the pep was.
I agree. But go ahead.
You're wrong. This is good production. That's all I gotta say.
What I was gonna say is, I liked that she did a full-on pop song. Do I think it's a good pop song? I think it's average. I think it's a little bit below Mariya's pay grade, as I might say, and that's coming from a place of complimentariness. I think it's she could make a better pop song. Is what I'm saying, which we'll get into. Track 13's coming up, Mateo. We'll get into that.
It is coming up, I guess. Okay,
it's coming up soon. So I guess we're fiending a bit on Archie here, which is interesting.
I think we are fiending. That's why it is called Aux Fiends.
Aux Fiends. And like I say always, we never talk about the album in advance beyond the basic intro you hear on the episode. Off air, we don't talk about it basically. Yeah. Certainly not the songs. We save it all for here. So let's put that into track 11, Autumn. Mateo, what'd you think?
First thought in my head, slumber.
I agree. A little bit. Yeah.
Let me get into it.
Yeah, go ahead and get into it.
It took speaking of, it took me, I'd say around 2 minutes to actually get into it. But when I got into it, I felt Autumn put me honestly into a trance. And like a good trance. Okay. In a good way. Again, the beautiful piano. Gotta point out, she also was building again with the instrumentation. I thought there was nice use of saxophone. it grew on me. Honestly, I would go back to Autumn. Was it my absolute favorite? No, but I think there was a lot of good parts of it where it can just grow and appreciate overall for me. What did you think?
This was a contender for the worst for me. I think Archie, it just does not work for me at all. At least with Autumn, you have a more core Mariya sound, as we're referring to it as right now. You have that core sound, but it's a little bit more forgettable. I think what's interesting is vocally, I think it's probably one of the more challenging songs for her to sing, but musically, it's a little bit lackluster for me. I agreed the horns were pretty well used, and I do like the vocals. I do love the vocals in the songwriting. It's just musically, I didn't feel like it came together in a very fulfilling way as some of the other previous tracks have. So for me, maybe not the one I'm going to come to the most often, but still good. Good enough, I'd say.
I agree more with you on Autumn than I do on Archie.
That's interesting.
Honest, but
hey, look, I'm not going to fully harp on Archie. It's just that I think it's, again, below her pay grade a bit. That's all I'll say.
Okay, Rishabh. Sure. Is that all you got to talk about for Autumn? Is that it? That's
it. I think it's a little bit more forgettable, but still a decently worthy Mariya song.
Okay. All right. So I think it's time for track 12. Wind.
Track 12.
Let me go into this.
Go for it.
I liked it. Hell yeah, dude.
Yes.
Great beat. Mariya is back. That's all I can say. Upbeat.
She came back.
She came back. She came good. I actually started dancing to this song.
It is so good.
And this was absolutely a top contender for me. Great piano. If I'm being honest, this felt like the climax of the album. I thought that was perfect. It was. It was literally the climax of the album. It was perfect placement. Just the concept of building that we talked about, because that is what this album is. It's just building upon each other. Yeah. And Mariya does that so good. I think this Wind, it was exactly what the album was building up to.
Really, I 100% agree. I 100% agree. This was like so close. I'm already regretting not having this as my favorite one. It's so close. It's just that Beauty has that like extra layer, which I think some of the other tracks don't have. Wind is maybe it's recognizable, but still easily the best of many of these tracks. I love the interesting vocal arrangement and engineering that's done here. It's peppy, but it has like a potency to it. It's back to that rock sound. You hear actual wind samples. It feels like you're in a windstorm. Just when you think the song's about to end, it has like that little false ending. It comes in with really good piano, really great drums, great guitar. I almost wish he came in with like a little bit more vocals at the very end to really seal the song. But yeah, this is a really powerful, very peppy, very, very enjoyable, very, very well-made song. 100% agree with everything you said, Mateo.
100%.
Climax of the entire album. This is what I feel like the journey has built to, you know?
Absolutely. I said it. I absolutely agree. Wind just built everything upon everything that had come before. I honestly, I think you even got me almost regretting not putting Wind as a top contender. But you know what? Okay. If I were to say my favorite track, it would still be Eve. Yeah. But if you were listening to if you only do, instead of just random tracks off the album, if you only listen to it all together cohesively, Wind for sure is the best, I think. It just gained so much from hearing all the other previous tracks to then this one. It's just good. It's just good.
It's like being on this journey, this 50-minute musical journey, and you feel like it's leading to something, and then it does. That's very satisfying, and I love that she decided to have this be like the second to last. I mean, honestly, kind of a basically last track.
Technically.
Kinda.
I mean, I guess it's technically not, but like it is. I don't know. Just everything about Wind I thought was good and interesting.
If this album's a roller coaster, then I feel like Wind is like that big final drop. And track 13 is when you're returning back to, base station where the ride started, literally. Yeah, we get a remix of the first track, which I think is really good, very creative, and I really like this track. It's a great remix. It's like a hip hop remix, and Mariya throws you a curveball even at the very end, which I think is amazing. What do you think, Mateo?
Yeah, so track 13, Kiss Me, like you said,
Yeah.
it was a remix of the first one.
Yep.
Yeah, I wrote a straight up funky.
Yeah. If you like the first track, I can't imagine you not liking a very interesting take and an experimental take of the first track. It's that seals the deal, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the entire theme we've talked about throughout this album musically has been versatile sound, but sticking to something that's very core. I mean, track 13 is like literally the very embodiment of that theme. Kiss Me is like pretty much like full circle, literally. And an excellent bookend to what's a very interesting journey and a very fun one.
I think so, yeah. If I'm being honest, though, I do like the first version in the Room of Colored Capes version better.
Yeah. I
didn't necessarily vibe. I even wrote down, like, even though I don't necessarily vibe with this version as much, I still will come back to it. But Mariya deserves it. Like, I'll cut her some slack. She like earned it. She earned to be experimental on this. You know, she could go. You know, she could throw a curveball in. She like 100% earned it.
Yes.
It's like there was even better mixing. Honestly, I felt.
Yeah, it was good. It was well
better
mixed.
Mixing on this one than even the first track. Even though I enjoy In the Room of Colored Capes more, I thought there was better mixing. Again, this chorus. Just amazing. I mean, I don't want to repeat myself because I already said it, but like the chorus is just amazing. That's really just how I feel about the album as a whole. Just like copy and paste that chorus into your mind and how I feel and how you feel when listening to that. That's just kind of how I feel about this album.
Yeah. It's the arrangements. It comes down to the arrangements, and it's the type of songwriting that has that structure to it, that has that robustness to it. And it still doesn't feel like, it doesn't feel like it's been stifled by the rules. Like there's experimentation, there's imagination, there's like a cinematic quality to it, but it's, it's familiar. It rings true to something we've heard in like core genres like jazz, classical, rock, and it brings it together. And I think we're passionately getting toward our album reviews here, Mateo. So give me a summary here of what you think. I mean, I think we're agreeing here, and we're agreeing quite passionately about our positiveness about this album. So go ahead, Mateo, take the floor.
All right, thank you. To be honest, overall, solid album. I thought it was good. I thought it was a good pick from you. A little surprised.
Thank you.
By far, definitely my favorite pick that you have done.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I am now interested in Ukrainian music. Like, I will actually go look up some more, and like I'm gonna go back and listen to more Mariya stuff and just other stuff from the Ukraine. Sorry, I cut you off. What were you about to say?
Nothing important. I was just gonna add, especially coming off the heels of Plantasia, where we were honestly quite agreeing. Yeah. It's nice that we have 2 episodes of agreement in a row here.
Ooh, we'll see if we'll agree again on the next one. Not to get too ahead of ourselves, but okay, and enough of the good parts about this album.
Yeah.
I really only had kind of 2-ish things to say. They weren't bad, but it's more parts of the album where I felt like, if I'm being honest, I think 1 or 2 tracks, not necessarily cut, but maybe swap to a second album or a different album. I think they're good songs, but I just felt like they weren't as cohesive. I think it'd probably definitely be like Be My Boy. I just think I didn't feel the building that I did with almost all the other songs. And there was a few songs that were good, but also I just felt 30-ish seconds or like a minute too long. But again, this album is solid. Yeah,
and in defense of Mariya too, what Mateo is referring to is like 1 or 2 tracks from a 15-minute length album, which is pretty long up there in terms of length. There's clearly obviously longer albums, but it's up there in terms of length. And yeah, I mean, if it's not clear already, I second pretty much almost everything Mateo said here. I think we've said it throughout, our track reviews. It's creative, it's ambitious, it feels like something familiar, but it builds upon that. It builds upon it in imaginative ways. It uses, classic music structure to its advantage, but also builds upon it, creates experimental sounds out of it. and has different tonalities throughout. You really feel like you're going on a different journey even within the tracks. The track might start a certain way but build into something else instrumentally, and you feel like you're getting that sort of variety, while Maria's voice, which is very unique but also very stable yet versatile, very hard to describe, keeps it all together. It's surprising to me how well the album comes together. And the fact that it has those mirroring tracks at the end and Wind as that climax, I think just gives this like a huge cinematic epic quality to it, which I think maybe Mateo, being someone who had never heard of this, might have taken you a little bit by surprise, seeing such,
definitely,
such an unknown for us here in the States, have such a, great sound that we are all unfortunately unfamiliar with. And that's a call, of course, for, all of our listeners, and hopefully we, here at the podcast also, to strive to hear music that's, outside of our, border barriers, which I think,
cultural music that we usually listen to.
So hopefully you guys will also seek out maybe more of Maria's music, and she's very active. I know that she's, always doing more singles, and she has a few other albums, and to seek her out and seek out more music from Ukraine and Russia as well, which, by the way, I'm still waiting for the answer. Hopefully someone will let me know how close those languages are. I'm genuinely curious.
Oh, yeah. I do want to just say this, like, again, because I know you ain't going to hear this from me again, or I don't think you will, but this was a good pick, Rishabh.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, this album, Kiss Me, it really did put Ukraine on the musical map for me, because I don't think I'd ever listened to any Ukrainian song before, if I'm being honest, or really any Russian music before. And again, any listeners, tell us how close or off we are.
Yeah.
And kind of just to wrap up my album review, I think this album insists upon itself, but in a good way.
Yes,
in a good way.
That's a very good way of putting it. It really does. And hopefully it's a call to action for all of us to, not count out Ukraine or any of those areas, Russia or Ukraine, to in the music scene. I think, I don't know if this is incorrect. Maybe it's very reductive, but I know for sure here in America, when we talk about international music, we'd never refer to Russia or Ukraine. So I think there's, especially coming from the perspective, that me and you have, people who really enjoy music and analyze it. I think, props to Mariya for, creating an album that hopefully, really encourages people to maybe seek out more after listening to her things and seek out more from that area. So definitely something good came out of that. Mateo, let's go into our ratings if you're ready.
Yeah, Rishabh, you go first. I need to know what you rated this.
I'm feeling good about this. I had a slightly lower rating, but hey, let's just do it. Let's go for a 9 out of 10. Let's go that high. Why not?
Okay. You scared me a little bit when you said let's go for a lower rating. At first, honestly, I was about to say, wait, do I have a higher rating on your pick than you do?
But
no. The world is still safe. I don't have a higher rating, but it's still high. By far, I went back. This is the highest rating I've given for one of your picks. This album is an 8 out of 10 for me.
Sweet. I was almost at 8. Yes, I was almost at 8. I bumped it up. I just think there's a few tracks here that are so good, even individually, that for me it's a solid 9. Even the worst tracks, even Archie is like still pretty solid.
Good.
Even Archie is pretty solid. Yeah. So
I will say that I think if I knew Ukrainian or even Russian or whatever, to actually fully understand the lyrics, that would easily make it like a 9 out of 10. Because some tracks I just couldn't find any translation for.
Yeah.
So I just kind of left in the blind, and I don't know Ukrainian. So I just went off the sounds, and I thought they were good. But 8 out of 10 for sure, with a chance. If I was in another life Ukrainian, it could have been 9 out of 10 for me.
So Mateo, last episode we were discussing if Plantasia is our highest score so far between the both of us. And now I think we've made a new record within the matter of one episode of our highest score put together.
I think this is definitely for
8 and 9. Other than
9.
Discovery, let's be clear. Other than Discovery, which was
what did you give Discovery? Not to get too sidetracked.
I don't remember.
I gave it a 10. I gave it a 10.
It must have been a 9.5 or a 10.
Okay.
I think it must have been a 9 to 10 somewhere. Okay. I hope.
But for sure, for one of our own like single picks, because we'll never have another Discovery. But for our own single pick, this is definitely the highest.
I'm afraid nothing's gonna beat this for a while.
I don't know.
So high up there.
Some Ukrainian music to finally bring us together.
I don't know. Well, we'll see what if anything comes up to beat this. I feel like we're becoming Aux Friends out here. I don't know. We're gonna have to change the name of the podcast.
I don't know. Aux Friends, yeah. Sheesh.
Mateo, I hope your next pick. Let's get into that.
Yeah.
Gets us back to Aux Fiends.
I know. Hopefully I was going to say. Speaking of Aux Friends, this might make us Aux Fiends.
Let's talk about
Maybe not though. Let me introduce it. Okay. Let me just give a little blurb. Chris Epting from HuffPost said, "This is one of the best albums you've never heard. It is came out in 2016. Okay. I'll say this: it has been my favorite album and jam of the 2021 summer. It's indie, alt, psych rock. My album's voice is, drum roll, Penny Days by Night Moves."
I'm excited.
I don't
slightly.
You're not familiar with it, correct?
No, but the genres you listed make me interested. At least I like those genres, and I'm actually quite excited.
Yeah, this is by far definitely the album of the summer for me. I can't believe it took me 5 years or whatever to actually finally hear of this. I need to give it a shout out. My friend Joe had put me on this album. I love it, and I just kind of we'll get into it in the next episode. But I definitely am very interested on your feelings.
Yeah, I'm excited for this one.
I'm very interested.
Yeah, assuming we're talking about the same Joe, I think we'll have a good album on our hands here.
Yeah.
So, well, Mateo, this has been what might be quite a historic episode.
Yes.
Of Aux Fiends, friends. I don't even know what to call it anymore.
Aux Friends. Hey, I think it's Aux Friends with that high rating.
It's a little bit of a special edition, Aux Friends. Okay.
Yeah, a little off edition.
That's great. Okay. So everybody, I want to thank you for listening here today, and I want to thank Craig. Thanks as always.
Thank you, Craig.
And we'll see you guys in the next one, hopefully with a little more fiending, but maybe not. We'll see. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.